About page, starts on page 13. Messianic Prophecies and Hostile Witnesses is the title of it. I'm not sure about the hostile witness, but Larry, you lead us in prayer and get started, please.
Father in heaven, we're indeed thankful for this beautiful Lord's Day and the opportunity to assemble here today to have a class with you. And Lord, I just pray that you be with us during this class. Help us to gain a better understanding of your word and better serve you. Lord, we pray that you'll be with us, be with the other classes, and be with them as well. Join them. Ask you to do this and forgive us of our sins. In Jesus' name we pray.
Just do a tiny bit of review of what we had last week. We were talking about the mysteries. What in this book? What's the two big mysteries they're talking about here? First one's Christ, and what was the other one? They talked about the mysteries, and I hadn't really thought of it that way, but that's what he's talking about. Is that the Gentiles were going to be. The word was going to the Gentiles too, and we talked about last week. That's the one thing that the Jewish people probably had more problem than anything else. They were God's chosen people, and they didn't want anybody else to have it. They wanted to be special, and they'll be the only ones that could get it, and that's probably one of the things that they fought against for many years. They're still God's chosen people. I think the way I look at it, they were God's chosen people, and they failed Him. They failed God, and they turned away and left, and so many times that they turned and left from God. It was I know you could think about all the times from the judges and all that, all the times that they'd turn away from God, and then God, we need help. We're in bad trouble, and they come back. It wouldn't last very long, and they'd be right back again. And that was part of the problem. That I think it's something all of us we got a problem with too. Sometimes we think it's something different. Ann?
But they still, in spite of the fact that they went away from God all those times, Jesus still came through that line of the Jewish ancestors.
That's really kind of what this lesson is about. I think if you look at this on page 15 and 16, it's prophecies and ones that are fulfilled. And I think it's we're going to there'll be a lot of reading here in this thing. It's amazing all these prophecies that were fulfilled. And I know one thing that the author in this book says, this might be one of the most convincing things to a Jew, if you can study with a Jew honestly, the prophecies in the Old Testament that were fulfilled in the New Testament. We got to remember there was over a 400-year gap between the last book of the Old Testament. I'm not sure which one. I can't remember which one was it. I don't know if it was Malachi or one of those was the last book, prophecy, the last book that was written in the Old Testament. And about over a 400-year gap between the New Testament, between Christ, and it was probably even longer than that by the time they had the New Testament, the books. They got some books in that time, but it was quite a few years later that they started getting these letters that were written quite a bit later. So it's amazing they had this gap, and they couldn't really understand it. The the Jewish religion was they were God's chosen people. They were the people that God selected to do, and it was going to go throughout the entire world, and it was going to last for eternity, and that's what they still want to put their head on, that it was going to last forever. It is, but not the way they thought it was. It's going to come now through Christ, and that is never going to end. But they could not see that, and they were still looking for that kingdom of David that was going to rule the world and dominate the world and take away the Roman Empire and everything else, and he was going to rule it, and that wasn't what he was going to do. He never really did plan to do that. It was a spiritual kingdom. Let's start out in some of these writings. I know I've gone through this, and I made 2 pages of notes of all these things, but in a break summary. Some of them I think are, you look at them and you say, does that make sense? Some of them, a couple of them I think almost you wonder about. But some of them, there's no doubt what they are, and it's good. Let's start out with Isaiah 7:14. Zach, you got that?
I can. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel.
Remember, this is well over, I don't know how many years Isaiah was before, that was done before Christ was born. I would say well over 500 years. I'm just guessing. I don't really know when Isaiah was actually written. But it was written a long time before that. A virgin is going to conceive and have a baby. Now, that was fulfilled over here in Matthew. I think you can probably pull about any of the Gospels, and that Matthew 12:3, virgin conceived, and we all know about Mary had the baby, through God's intercession, and we know that was pretty obvious what happened, and that's something we all know. Most of the fulfillments that we read about here, we know all those, because that was the story that we knew. We know from the Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are really tells us that's the Gospels. That tells us what happened to Christ, and I think that is the key.
Bill, right here in Matthew, verse 22 says this all took place to fulfill prophecy.
What was that again? I can't.
In Matthew 1:22, it says this took place to fulfill a prophet.
Yeah.
That exact verse you just read.
Gil. Also, Isaiah, he prophesied so much. I mean, he was known for us as the Messianic prophet because he told all that Messiah.
I was going through all these, and I don't know how many times I went to Isaiah. It was tremendous amount of these prophecies were in Isaiah, and there were some of them, and some of them I would never thought of, but it's amazing, from Jeremiah and everything else, Micah, and all these different ones. And it wasn't just one book that did it; it was numerous books. And I think which I think actually shows again the importance of it and the breadth of what he was doing.
In Isaiah, my writing here is 77 to 86 BC that here is written. during that time.
That's what Isaiah's. So that's,
Oh, it's the 700? I just looked at it. Oh, yeah, right, yeah, right.
so it's a long time. I mean, it's not something that just appeared. You know, it's amazing we can understand that somebody could they could tell us. Of course, what's the difference? God knows all. He knows what's going to happen before we do it. Before we do it, He gives us the ability to think, but He already pretty well knows what we're going to do. I'm not sure. I guess we can change it, but I wonder. He pretty well knows what we're going to do, and then that. The Numbers 24:14. The next one here. So who got that one? 17. I can't read my own writing.
I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and batter the brow of Moab, and destroy all the sons of Ammon.
This star is going to cut. When are we going to hear about the star again? Yeah, think about Matthew 2:2. Who saw the star? Yeah, and the wise men, they followed the star. It was there. I mean that star was there from Matthew 2:2. The wise men saw that. That's continuation of what's. How could you predict something like that? And unless you had God's knowledge, it's just amazing. But that's something. And Genesis 49:10. Who's got that one? Yeah, go ahead.
The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the people.
Basically, what are they saying there? The scepter shall not depart from Judah. Christ is going to come out of Judah. He's going to come out, and we go through this whole genealogy. We'll get into that a little bit later. But all the genealogy, Christ is going to come out of Judah. He's going to be part of that party. Go here in Matthew 1:2 and Hebrews. Talk about. We can read the genealogy of Christ. We can go through all those names in Matthew about where he came from. It follows all the way through Christ. Abraham to Christ, to David to Christ, and all that's where he came out of that genealogy, and it's something I think. So that genealogy is going to be there forever.
And when it says something like the scepter and the ruler's staff, we're talking about kingship. We're talking about something that represents an all-powerful person.
Yeah.
Who's in charge, somebody's will take it over. That's what the scepter is
Yeah.
supposed to represent.
That represents that kingdom, and that is a very very good point, and that's that scepter, and I think 2 Samuel 7:12 through 16. Somebody got that one? Okay.
When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. When he commits iniquity, I will discipline him with the rod of men, with the stripes of the sons of men. But my steadfast love will not depart from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away from before you. And your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me. Your throne shall be established forever.
That's this one's almost got a double meaning. It's talking about David, the kingdom back then. It's also talking about Christ, which is the one that's going to last forever. When David's going to come, and then many years later, Christ is going to be there, and that's over here from Mark 11:10. The coming kingdom, from David to Judah, it's going to go from that. But it just continues on. It never stops.
I also think that here the representation of David and Jesus, being a type of David, was a kingship that everyone really thought the world of. It was a great kingship, but it only lasted for a short period of time, which leads us to Jesus, which is forever, I think. So it's a great correlation that you see two kingships, one quite honored. Everybody honored David. We honor David and how good he was, but there's a better one in Jesus.
Yeah, and you wonder all the things that David did. You wonder some of the things that if we ever did some of those things, they just write us off. But he did a lot. But he repented. He changed. He came back, and God accepted those things, and he did things that none of us would even we never even think of doing that. But he did that, and God took him back. But like you said, that kingdom lasted for maybe 30, 40, 50 years. I don't know his kingdom was. It wasn't much longer than that. And where Christ is going to last forever, no doubt. In Genesis 12:3, somebody got that one?
I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And in you all the family of the earth shall be blessed.
And over here in Genesis and Galatians 3:8, all nations shall be blessed. By what Christ did. That's really the fulfillment of that. All the world is going to be blessed by what that was going to be. Like I said, they didn't really understand back then. And I think the next one is Micah 5:2, which I don't think most of us would think of Micah. We don't. It's one of the later ones. We don't read that very much. Somebody got that one? Micah 5:2.
But you, O Bethlehem, Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth me, one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from old, ancient days. Therefore you shall give them up until the time.
Bethlehem was a small little town, very small compared to Jerusalem or any of the other places. But they predicted that Christ was going to come out of Bethlehem. To me, that's not a coincidence. That's an exact prophecy of what's going to happen. You go back, from Matthew and Luke. Basically, we all know where he came out and was born in Bethlehem, and we all know what it was. And then Isaiah 9:6-7. Somebody got that one?
To us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulders. His name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace, there will be no end on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it
And basically that is fulfilled over here in in Luke 1:30 through 33. I'll read that 30 through 33. And the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God. Behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus. He shall be great and be called the Son of the Most High. And the Lord God will give to him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and his kingdom there will be no end." So that's the field, and I think to me is one. I think Hosea 11:1. I think is one of the most, to me, one of the most telling ones.
When Israel was a youth, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called him my son.
Where did Christ go after he was born? Remember what was happening then. The ruler there wanted to. He didn't want a king to coming in, and the wise men came there, and he had all these people killed, all these babies killed, and I think that's going to be described in the next word. But out of Egypt, he had to go. He went to Egypt, and then he came out of Egypt. They called him out of Egypt after that time period is over. I'm not sure how long he was in Egypt. Maybe a year or 2, 3, maybe. I don't really know. But it wasn't a super long time. But he went back. And Jeremiah 31:15.
Thus says the Lord, a voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted for her children because they are no more.
And that's that weeping of the children they're talking about. All these babies that were under 2 years old, he had them all killed. And this guy was he wasn't taking a chance. Just kill them all. And that's one reason Christ. They knew what was going to happen, and they sent him to Egypt to come out. Yeah.
In Matthew 5, 14 and 15, it tells that they took him to Egypt, and they were there until the death of Herod. However long after that,
Yeah.
that Herod lived, and when Herod died, then they came back.
It was several years, I think. There's no doubt about that. But but God in His wisdom knew what was going to happen, so He planned for that, and it was, like I said, 400 or 500 years before this all happened. It's just not by accident that those things happen. The next group is on John the Baptist. Just a couple of them on John the Baptist. I think we all know the story of John the Baptist pretty well. It starts out here, Isaiah 43:5. Somebody got that one?
The voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make it straight in the desert, a highway for God. Every valley shall be exalted, every mountain shall be brought low, critical places be made straight, the rough places made smooth. The glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all the flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken.
3-5, right? But a lot of the people were trying to make John the Baptist the Messiah. They wanted him to be the Messiah. He was the one of crying in the wilderness. John was a different guy. His clothing, what he ate, I don't think I want to eat that. The honey I might eat. I'm not sure. The locust I'm going to eat that. But you know, it's amazing. He was not the polished. He's not the polished preacher you'd see on the corner that goes in, and we see all that, you know, predicted in the New and what they fulfilled in the New Testament. We've seen that. You know, I think over here in Malachi 3:1, excuse me, 3:1.
Behold, I send my messenger, and he will prepare the way before me. The Lord whom you seek will suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant in whom you delight. Behold, he is coming, says the Lord of hosts.
He's going to prepare the way for Christ. We see that in the New Testament, what he did. And it's always been, I think we talked about that before, and Justin talked to me not too long ago, where he baptized Christ. And you know, he was free from sin. He didn't have any sin. John didn't really want to do it because he knew this man was free of sin. He didn't have any sin. He knew that. And it wasn't too long later that John was beheaded, and it's amazing. But that is the way. He wasn't the Messiah they thought they were looking for, even that, because he wasn't going to be a ruler. But they would go out, and all the people were coming out in the countryside to hear him, and then we go to the next part is the ministry of Jesus. You know, all these things, most of these we pretty well know. You know, like so much of this is ministry of Jesus is going to Isaiah. Isaiah 11:2. Somebody got that one?
The Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord.
And that Spirit of the Lord came upon him. And think about, we just talked about his baptism. We just had that lesson on that not too long ago. Whenever that Spirit, he was baptized, that Spirit of the Lord came on him. And I think probably everybody could see that. And that is and the next one, Psalms 78, 1-2.
Listen, O my people, to my instruction. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings of old.
How many parables did Jesus teach people?
A lot.
Who didn't he teach in a parable?
Yeah, and you know, and I think sometimes we're kind of fascinated by these parables, and we should be. But he taught so many parables because that's what the people understood. They understood them better than probably we do, because it was something that they were brought up with when we weren't. But you know, we have to kind of understand that. But he taught them, and he was going to continue this teaching. And I think here's the next one, Isaiah 6, 9-10. I think this is an important one here, I think.
He said, go and tell this people, keep on hearing, do not understand, keep on seeing, and do not perceive. Make the heart of the people dull, their ears heavy, shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and return and be healed.
That, to me, that's the most important things. Understanding with our heart, not just a verbal memorization. It was understanding what we're really after, what we're ready to do. And that is, to me, that's one of the key things of doing that. Jesus, the parables, he fulfilled the prophecy of God, and we understand that. To me, a true Christian understands what God wanted us to do through our minds, through our understanding. They really understand what God wants us to be. It's not just a memorization thing. It's something that God we want to be that way. We want to be like God, and be understand God the way He is. Here, number of Isaiah 35, 5 through 6.
The eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped, and the lame shall weep like a deer, the tongue of the dumb sing, for waters shall burst forth in the wilderness and streams in the desert.
Eyes being open to understand these mysteries of God, the mysteries that was in that Old Testament. Christ basically opened eyes up. People who were blind, he opened their eyes, literally, and he opened, I think, the minds of people to understand what God was really about. And I think that is the key, and that is the thing. And Isaiah 42, 6 through 7.
I am the Lord, I have called you in righteousness. I will take you by the hand and keep you. I will give you the covenant to the people, the light of the nations. Open the eyes of the blind. Bring out the prisoners from the dungeon. Prison those who sit in darkness.
And over here on Luke 2:32, I think won't just read that, but that light was revealed to the Gentiles. That they were able to get this understanding. This basically their eyes were open. That revelation was revealed to the Gentiles, which, like I said, the Jews didn't really want that to happen because they wanted to be God's chosen people. And over here in Revelation 61:1, somebody got that one.
The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted and proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound.
Basically the Lord, they were anointed. You can talk about David was anointed, and then it goes to the New Testament, the heritage that Christ had, that flowed through. The next part here in Jerusalem, we're not going to get through this, and we'll have to cut off some of this. But in Jerusalem, the message is coming from Malachi 31:6. The message is coming from and that's going to be Christ. And in Jerusalem, he's talking about. And Christ over here in Matthew, Jesus came to Jerusalem. Remember him coming, going into Jerusalem. And there's several of these things in here. you know, they build the building of Jerusalem to the anointing. I think that's important. And I think right here's a couple of them. I think in Zechariah, the young man is coming in on a donkey. We won't read all that, but how did Christ come into Jerusalem?
On a donkey.
Riding on a donkey. Remember, a donkey. He just came. This wasn't that, and that really to fulfill the prophecy, and that was like done hundreds of years beforehand. And I think there's another couple. I think it's really. I can't read my writing here. In Psalms 118:20, he's going to be rejected by his people. He's going to be rejected by that, and we all know he was rejected by his own people, and for the most part. And I think here in Psalms 41:9, what's going to happen to Christ on that? He's going to be betrayed by a friend. We all know what happened with that. Whenever by his own apostles betrayed him, and it's. Can you imagine that would be predicted that far in advance? That he was going to be betrayed by a friend. Now that's happened before. I guess everybody could be betrayed by a friend, but to do that. And here's one I think is one that I don't think it can be. Zechariah 11:12 through 13. Somebody got that one? Can you imagine? We know what Judas received for betraying Christ. 30 pieces of silver. This is not just this is exact what happened. I mean, it wasn't just a casual reference, but it's something that was the rulers that he predicted over here in Psalms, that the council is going to do that to him. It's just amazing what they do. I'm going to run out of time. The humiliating death, I think, is one of the things that we all. I think we all know that. We've heard so many of those things. And Isaiah 53:2 through 8, he's going to be rejected by men. We all and you go through over here in Matthew and Luke, in the garden he's going to be rejected. He's going to be what's going to happen? He's betrayed there. In Psalms 22:7 through 8, the mocking of Jesus. We all know what happened to on that day. The mocking he had, the different things he had, the things over here in Isaiah 50, spat upon. And we know what happened. He was spat upon, and from Matthew 27:30. Then another one, I think, in what's that Psalms? I think that's Psalms. Psalms 22:15 through 22. We won't read that, but what's the one thing they talk about in here? What they're going to do to his garments? They're going to split his garments. They're going and give those and basically give those things for a sum. You know, they did that, and that we all know what happened with his garments. They're going. You know, they're going to. He's going to. You know, going to be killed. He's going to be a thing. All that's going to happen. You know, there's going to be a period of mourning there. Remember the sour wine they gave him? That was from Psalms 69:23. We know the sour wine they gave him. He was all the things he was born. You know. And when he died, you know, he commended his spirit to God, and take that into him, and I think here one is Galatians and Amos 8:9 through 10. One thing that was predicted that was going to happen, and I think people would say that today, that'd be foolishness. Darkness was going to come upon the earth. And what happened to his crucifixion? From the 6th to the 9th hour, it was darkness. In the middle of the day. This is just not something that could happen. Only with God's power could he do that. And that's something that Amos is one. I don't think that's a lesson that we use very often in that. But Amos, they predicted that. Then I think the last part, we'll do this pretty quickly. We all know this. You know, the resurrection. He said in Psalms he's not going to commit his soul to hell, basically, to soul. You know, then he ascended on the throne, and you know he's going to sit on the right hand, and all who come to him will be saved. And we saw that what happened in Acts. So, sorry we ran out of time, but I knew we wouldn't. There's too many verses here. So we'll start in next week. We'll start in. I think it's on Abraham, isn't it? Abraham's sacrifice and the crucifixion next week. Thanks.
As much scriptures there was.
foot barely hit that, which means